Hey, everybody, it's Christine Parakis, and we're back here on the Career Invincibility Show. And I cannot tell you how delighted I am to bring you our next guest. Josh Tapp is one of my favorite people on the planet. We always have a blast. Our calls always go long. He is somebody that I've partnered with, I've worked with, I've been on his show. He's an amazing host. He has worked with over 500 entrepreneurs, helping them build 1,000 paying fans, each and every one of them, if you can imagine. He's the host of the Lucky Titan podcast, and he's worked with entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm talking multiple continents. And he leverages masterminds to enhance customer engagement and build real and lasting trust between service providers and their audiences. So I know he's going to bring us a lot of wisdom today. Josh, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thanks, Christine. Glad to be here.
So tell me, what is the most important thing you think it takes to build a large audience? And I think 1,000 people is a lot.
Yeah, and I think everybody thinks there's so many different aspects to it, but what it really boils down to is just being a good human being. A lot of people that I've worked with, they come to me and like, okay, I think it's just the fear and the unknown, and I guess the uncertainty that they have when they're trying to build an audience. And they come to me and ask, how do I build an audience? And I'm like, well, you're a good person. just be you, right? And
hopefully.
Right. Yeah, hopefully. Well, and if they're not, they're usually not talking to me. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
But honestly, when it comes down to it, the number one thing when you're building an audience, it comes down to being a good person, but getting your message into the hands of people who are going to resonate with that message. And, that's marketing 101. But the reality is when you're building an audience, if your message doesn't resonate well with the people that you're reaching out to, you're probably handing it off to the wrong people.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And let's face it, you've got tens of thousands of followers on the one hand, but your promise is to get 1,000 paying customers or fans. So what's the difference? Because people hear that number in the 1,000 and they might say, well, that's not an influencer. That's not somebody, blah, blah, blah. They're always comparing ourselves to others. And, and you've got both. Right. So
right.
How is it that you, what's the difference between, tens of thousands versus 1,000 paying fans?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I want to exemplify it by using a story because we had a guy that wanted us to work with him. He had 250,000 people who were following his various pages. And he's like, okay, let's do a promotion. So we go and we launch something and crickets. I mean, not a single person bought. And I was just blown away because I've been talking about this for a long time, but they're what I like to call the vanity metrics. People really like to have, I have 1 million followers, but the reality is you almost can't service that many people effectively in a way that their needs are actually being met. And when you become somebody of influence, I wouldn't even say an influencer, because there's a lot of connotations with that. But when you're somebody of influence, a true leader, you're the type of person who's going to start attracting more people who will want to hear what you have. But there's a difference. So for example, on LinkedIn, we have, I think, like 11,000 connections, right? Nothing huge, but it's a pretty decent amount of connections. And when we post something on there, we do get a relatively good amount of engagement. But I wouldn't say those people are my fans, or I would like to call them, your army of people. The people who are truly the raving fans, the paying customers, are the people who are willing to stick with you no matter what. They're the people who are going to, if times go bad, they're going to keep paying you. If, you had, your one of your spouses or children had, or single spouse, right? If your spouse or your children, got cancer, they would be the people to reach out to you and actually genuinely care about what's going on with you. And I'm not the person who made up the 1,000 raving fans concept. That's been around for a long time. I think one of the people who really popularized it was Frank Kern. And as a marketing guy, he says, if you want to make $1 million a year, you only need 1,000 raving fans. And I've latched onto that method my whole life, and I guess that ideology, because I said, okay, how in my life can I congregate enough people and get in front of enough people to have 1,000 people who are willing to stick with me and, get me to the point where I'm making $1 million and I can help them expand their influence. And so I know that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but when it comes down to it, when you're building an audience of raving fans, you're more focused on helping a smaller group of people instead of the millions, the masses.
So what does it take to, how many people do you have to be in front of to get 1,000 paying fans?
Yeah, and that's a really good question because it kind of varies on the market, right? Because if you're in the consulting space, for example, I mean, you're going to have a lot smaller market than somebody who's selling, baby bottles or something, right? And
Right.
if you're trying to get yourself in front of, having 1,000 raving fans, my first recommendation to everybody is getting yourself in front of 1,000 fans, just 1,000 people who are willing to follow you, uh, follow your social media or what have you. But typically, for most people, I've seen that they have to pass about 100,000, I would say those fluff followers, vanity metric followers, to be able to accomplish the goal of getting 1,000 people actually paying them.
I hear you. So there's a difference. And what is the secret sauce to getting people to pay you?
Yeah, absolutely. The number one thing that I've seen is it's all about the customer engagement, right? And we hear that term thrown around a lot, and there's like board meetings done on it and everything. You, Christine, having worked at larger companies, I mean, you hear that thrown around a lot, but the reality is that if you want to get people engaged, the secret sauce to it is creating opportunities where you can physically or virtually interact with them. When people are trying to, build out their audiences, they're always trying to find the easiest way to not have to interact with people because, quote unquote, they don't have time. And the reality is, I've found in my own business, we've run three different companies at the same time, and time is hard to get, but the reality is you can grow a company in 5-10 hours a week if you're in the online space, for example. And when it comes down to it, if you're focusing on how can I get in a situation where I can help a group of people instead of just the one-to-one, that's where magic starts to happen. I had a mentor one time who was, I was working in the done for you space. So we were doing marketing for companies individually. And as much as I love doing that, I could really only handle about 15 to 20 clients at any given time because it took so much time to manage everything that we were doing with them. And he told me, my mentor came to me and he said, okay, if if you could work with maybe 10 people at one time, you could literally 10 times your income with the time that you have. And that just stuck with me. I'm like, man, well, how could I coach people or work with people in a way that I could be working with more than one person at any given time? And that was what really got us introduced into the mastermind concept, which the mastermind is basically a place where you get people who are they're pursuing the same goals in the same room together to help maximize on each other's audiences, on each other's on the networking ability of one another. And the difference between a mastermind and a networking event, for example, is that a networking event is a place that you simply just go to meet people, right? And a mastermind is there to actually help you talk about really your big obstacles that you're trying to avoid and the big opportunities that you have in your business and how you can work together. And that's what we're all about, is creating those situations where people can come together and actually work with each other instead of just meeting each other.
Well, and I can speak firsthand to how much fun that is, how rewarding it is, and what a great model it is because we've partnered together to create masterminds and we've got our Resilient Leader Mastermind community together. And it's been a blast, really, for me, learning from you and putting all the infrastructure together and then getting the opportunity to interact with people and get them to interact with each other. That's when the real magic happens because, yeah, I've got an answer for everything. Trust me, when I'm talking to people from my years of experience and all the perspectives I bring as an entrepreneur, a lawyer, a business advisor, et cetera. But it's wonderful for people to bring their own perspectives. And that's what the mastermind really allows you to do. So you're not living in a silo and you're not just getting the perspective of one advisor. You're getting,
Right.
9 other advisors in the room with you, and that's powerful. And I remember running a multi-million dollar business and feeling like there was nobody who understood what I was going through. Because back then there wasn't, I didn't even, I mean, I knew about masterminds, but it was always informal. And those that I participated in were voluntary and People, had a certain level of commitment. They weren't really engaged. There wasn't any formality to the structure. And I didn't think that I would have that for me, nor would I have somebody organize that for me when I really needed them and I was growing a rapidly accelerated company into an 8-figure business from a startup. So, it's a huge solution that you have really built a tremendous model for that. And can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, well, and I want to touch on a point that you just brought up in there because it helps illustrate this for our model. But the reality is that, when you're doing one-on-one coaching, no matter how good you are, there's only so much you can give to somebody, right? Because you're giving them one perspective on the problem. And even though it's a lot more highly educated or has more experience behind it, you're never going to beat getting in a room with 5 to 10 other people who are maybe a little bit further ahead than you, or they're at the same level as you are, but you're all trying to accomplish the same goal. You then have 10 minds helping solve your specific needs. And that's the value of the mastermind. And our model is strictly built around that, is helping people to really understand that it's about getting in the room with the right people, not the right person. Because a lot of people reach out to me. Early on, I built my network, and a lot of people are coming to me saying, "Oh, can you help me connect with this person?" And I'm always willing to do that. And not that that's a bad thing to go one-to-one, but when we started putting people into these mastermind groups, it was facilitating a relationship for 10 top entrepreneurs. Our first one, we had, I think, five or six millionaires in there. And then we had a bunch of other people who were in that 6-figure level, and they were all trying to work on the infopreneur space. They were all selling information products or, coaching, consulting, or some sort of online product. And when we came together, you should have seen the results that came out of even just that first one, because each of the millionaires was able to help each other, but they were also helping these people who were really trying to just pass that 6-figure level, where they could start taking care of themselves. And that was really kind of the eye-opening moment for me. And our model's built completely around that by getting the right people in the right room. And that's everything that I believe, because there's a lot of ways you could get people in a room. I mean, you could just run Facebook ads or what have you and get people into a room together to do a mastermind, and that can work. But what we found is if you hand pick the people you put in that room based off of the audiences that they serve and based off of the obstacles that they're facing, that's when magic happens.
Well, and that's the magic of you, right? And so, I've as a guest speaker, I've been in those rooms with you, and it's really impressive the quality of people that you've brought together and the diversity, on multiple continents and different time zones and all over the globe. Truly, having worked with clients on 5 continents myself, it's a marvel to me. I did it the hard way before the internet,
You
but
flew to the continents.
yeah, right. Or telephones, at high cost. But yeah, it's just nice that we can all make it work. I'm doing something on Thursday that is with people in Africa and the UK, and it's really fun that the world is so small, and we just have to find the sweet spot of time zones, right?
Right.
To bring people together of international, perspective, and that's really fantastic. So, so aside from masterminds, one of the things that I love, I'm a huge proponent of, and it really, I'm fervent, believer now, especially after the hurricanes, of having weathered 2 Category 5 hurricanes alone, that, in the value of collaboration and partnerships, just like us, talk about that, and how do joint ventures and partnerships enter into your work and building raving fans?
Yeah. Yeah, you're good at this. You pull me right into what I want to talk about, Christine.
We're on the same mind.
Yeah, I'm saying we've worked together, so we know each other. It works well.
That's right.
So the joint venture partnership, and if people don't understand what that means, it basically just means a temporary partnership with somebody in promoting one another. There's tons of different ways you could do a joint venture partnership, but I've actually built almost all of my companies completely from the ground up, just using joint venture partnerships. We don't usually use ads or anything. You can use ads to kind of help stimulate what you're doing. But for us, we've actually found the cheapest and quickest way to get in front of a lot of your ideal customers is just finding somebody else who has an audience of your existing customers